Did we possibly avoid World War III with Iran in the Middle East? I'll tell you more about that. Also, can President Trump actually get the Russia-Ukraine war ended? It seems like both sides are dragging their feet, and Zelensky is no longer behaving as a partner we can trust. To help me go through all this, I have retired Colonel John Mills. Colonel Mills, thank you so much for joining me.
Stephen, thank you. It's always an honor to be on your show. Thank you.
So I want to jump right into this story, and you tell me what you know. This is trending on Twitter right now. President Trump, DNI Tulsi Gabbard, and DOD Pete Hegseth stepped in to halt an Israeli airstrike on Iranian nuclear sites in favor of negotiating. This is according to the New York Times. What do you know about this? I always hate having these stories come out. You know, the rest of us are just living our life, and then you find out behind the scenes there's attacks mobilizing and different things like that. What can you tell us about this situation?
Well, thank you, Stephen. Well, I mean, I'll be honest, a lot of this information was actually kind of out there, and the president has made his policy positions, I think, pretty clear. He was not going to allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. We're obviously, and it's been publicly reported, a lot of capabilities being moved into position. More F-35s immediately close by to Iran. 2 carriers into the region, B-2s to Diego Garcia, which is very abnormal. We all normally fly all of our B-2 missions all the way from Whiteman in Missouri. It's very expensive to move the ground support equipment and set up a forward logistics support and maintenance support for the B-2s. So for them to base out of Diego Garcia was significant. All these things, it was obvious something was going on, and the stated policy position is clear. No, Iran will have no nuclear weapons. I would like to approach this from a little different angle, though, and I've shared this with a number of parties, look, we've been talking about Iran and nuclear weapons for almost 30 years, okay? Maybe I'm the only one who remembers this. We've been talking about this since the 90s, okay? It's always been these ominous stories. Iran is one turn of the screw away from having a nuclear warhead. Iran is 30 seconds away from having that enriched uranium, et cetera, et cetera. I would like to posit, and I don't think it's unreasonable, that Iran probably already has 20 to 50. My guesstimate is 20 to 50 nuclear warheads, most likely from North Korea. But this would make sense because the missiles, all the missiles that Iran has, either has received or has self-developed, traced to North Korea, China, and the Soviet Union. They have Russia, excuse me. They have Chinese missiles that in the Chinese version are nuclear capable. So I think it's very logical after 30 years to presume. Now, have they self-developed a nuclear weapon? I don't know. Do they have 20 to 50 crude, unreliable North Korean warheads? North Korea does have nuclear weapons now at this point. Yeah, I would say we have to presume Iran has nuclear warheads. Now, the parsing of developed, developing versus obtaining, okay, Israel does not want Iran to develop nuclear warheads. And that is quite a different capability, knowing how to make them versus knowing how to install and use them. Very different, very different. So maybe there's a policy difference on developing versus having. But the challenge with the North Korean warheads, and the North Koreans are notorious for absolutely untrustworthy, shoddy workmanship. And having a nuclear warhead when you don't know if it's going to go off when you want it to go off, or it's not going to go off when you don't want it to go off, that's kind of important. And so I would say they probably have 20 to 50. They might be terrified to touch them, but at this point in time, 30 years later, I just, come on. I mean, Iran has a huge footprint of Chinese technicians, far greater than what we had in Iran during the height of the Shah's days in the late 70s. Their footprint is much larger, much more extensive. They have lots of North Koreans. They have lots of Russians. I think the Russians are more transactional, and if the Trump team is successful at beginning to peel Russia away from China, Russia might walk away from Iran. But I think so I look at this a little bit differently, in that I think you have to presume they have some nuclear warheads. Now, are they safe? Are they reliable? Are they actually usable? That's a different question.
Okay. The mainstream media keeps putting out conflicting messages. Because President Trump ordered a hit on the Houthis, now they're saying he's not the president of peace. He actually does want war. His war machine is just gearing up. Then you have the New York Times saying Trump waved off Israeli strike after divisions emerged in his administration. So now they're saying, well, he did wave off this strike of Iran, which could have caused a bigger war, but only because of division. And now you've got right-leaning Trump fans that are saying, this is further proof that he doesn't want war. Why else would he wave that off? What are your thoughts? Is there a lot of propaganda being put out there about President Trump?
Oh, of course. And there's even on, I'm sure there's factions even on our side of the fence. Okay. Shock, shock, shock. Okay. Look, this is a serious decision that you have to weigh. The likelihood of us being able to achieve 100% successful first strike is I think we've shown to be extremely accurate and effective, but that doesn't mean you're going to get everything. So I think you should be I'm not advocating a strike on Iran, nor am I saying no strike on Iran. I'm saying I'm not behind the veil. I don't have access to the current intelligence. This is serious policy making. We need to be careful and deliberate about this. And just because we can doesn't mean we should. At the same time, I'm not taking it off the table either. Iran is trouble. Iran is really trouble. Now, is the Trump team trying to give Iran a pathway from departing on their Chinese dependency? It almost, to me, on the outside, almost looks like there's a double peel-off being attempted by the Trump administration. They're trying to peel Russia away from China, and it almost looks like they're trying to peel Iran away from China also. Will either of them be successful? Well, if you don't try, it's definitely not going to be successful. So
it's interesting that you bring up this idea of peeling Iran away from China, separating their business relationships, their I guess being in bed together, for lack of a better word, because just today I read that Saudi Arabia and Iran are talking more than ever. Could that be part of the plan of peeling Iran away from China, that America establishes better relationship with Saudi Arabia helps peel Iran away from China?
Well, when you talk to the Saudis and in their hearts of hearts, their absolutely number one concern is Iran. No question about it. That is their mortal enemy. It is not Israel. It is absolutely Iran. However, with the Biden committee that was supposedly running our country for 4 years, they did nothing but insult the Saudis. They insulted Israel, they insulted the Saudis, they insulted Jordan, the UAE, they insulted everybody. These, holy smokes. I mean, for a lot of years, the Saudis, the Jordanians, UAE, Egypt, Israelis, they were very trusted partners, and the Obama-Biden committee just seemed to relish rubbing their faces in the dirt and driving them away. So that, I mean, Saudi was starting to realize, well, holy smokes, we can't count on America. Maybe we should start to talk a little bit with Iran. But in the end, I guarantee you, the Saudi royal family, they are very concerned about Iran. But I think it was late 23, China made these big announcements. China's brokering a peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Yeah, how's that worked out? Zero progress. So I think Saudi is looking at this from a Saudi first perspective. Don't blame them. America first. I mean, nations work best when they seek their best interests and take care of their people, and then work out peacefully differences with other nations. So I don't have any problem with Saudi Arabia working their best interests. They sure weren't getting it from the Biden committee, and I think they're much happier with the return of Trump. Maybe they're talking to Iran, but at the same time, from my personal experience with the Saudis, the last thing they trust is Iran.
Okay. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, the first time I realized that our relationship might be repairing and even deepening between the United States of America and Saudi Arabia was President Trump one of his first big announcements was he wanted Saudi Arabia to produce more oil. Most people said they're probably not going to do it. They're making a handsome profit. But then what does Trump do? He goes to the UFC fight, and the person he chooses to sit next to is the chairman for Aramco, the biggest oil producer in Saudi Arabia. I believe he was flashing to King bin Salman or Prince bin Salman and Saudi Arabia, look, we can sit down together. We can be partners. I think that would be really interesting. Let me switch gears with you really quickly on this. President Trump has proposed cutting foreign aid by 75%, slashing the State Department budget by 50%, and eliminating funding for the United Nations, NATO, and 20 other international organizations. This guy seems to really want to keep his promise to put America first. I don't believe he thinks NATO puts America first, the United Nations puts America first. Sending all of this, cherished, beloved taxpayer money that he has a fiduciary duty to behave properly with. He doesn't want that going to foreign countries, foreign nations. What are your thoughts on this information that's coming out of the White House about potential cuts in budget?
I think it's absolutely on the table. I'm going to approach this a little bit differently. I'm actually for foreign aid, but it has to have robust oversight and accountability. And almost everything we give should always be a loan. When did the UK pay off their World War II Lend-Lease? And they did pay off their World War II. This is a quiz class. 2006. 2006. The Brits, as annoying as they can be, actually did pay off their World War II loans. Okay, so I'm okay, but what we have found is just the utter feckless fraud in our foreign aid. So yeah, I'm for a lot of these things. Robust oversight and accountability at all times, and this has been a money laundering operation. I am never for a money laundering operation. So time to shut down the money laundering operation. And the UN, I think this is a real interesting point. I'm old enough that we used to have the John Birch Society was always mentioned. Oh, you're not one of those John Birchers, are you? They were the ones who get us, in the 50s and 60s, get us out of the UN. Look, I'm for the concept of something called the UN. The UN is a freak show of dysfunction. And look, Hamas has received $1 billion a year from the UN. 60% of that, roughly 60% of the funding of the UN is from the US. So for almost 30 years, Hamas received $1 billion a year. That's 600 million of US taxpayer money to do what? Essentially put in their pockets, create a super wealthy leadership. Well, most of the people of Gaza lived in horrible conditions, and they used it to also build up tunnels, mines, build up rockets and missiles. Yeah, this is a money laundering operation. I think it's time to totally zero out and start over again on something new. The UN is, I'm sorry, and I've had a lot of experience working with the UN as a U.S. government representative. It is a freak show of dysfunction and a money laundering operation at this point in time. Yeah, time to hit the reset button, as Hillary would say.
Okay. Speaking of money laundering operations, the Russia-Ukraine war, I noticed a lot of Americans kind of had a shift in perspective when they realized Biden and Democrats in Congress, even some Republicans, did not want oversight on the money that was being sent there. I think a lot of people are like, whoa, wait a minute, we don't mind sending money, but now CNN is saying, maybe 30% is getting there. Weapons are being sold on the black market. People in government are pocketing money. And the Biden administration does not have any plan or desire for oversight. Do you think that there was maybe a shift in the American people when they realized, wait a minute, they might just be throwing our cash at a money laundering machine?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it became relatively a fair fight. So Russians invade in early 22. Essentially by late 22, it had bogged down. They'd actually withdrawn from a number of their gains. And from that point on, it was relatively a fair fight, okay? However, and it wasn't until oversight was essentially instituted in December of 23 when an inspector general was appointed. And this is one of my basic rules. You never give away foreign aid without an inspector general. And even then, you got to make sure that inspector general, because just as Elon Musk has found out, I'm very disappointed with he's found out with a lot of the inspector generals who really were not doing their job. But we were giving away money without inspector general oversight at all until December 23. So we had a good year after equivalency, relative equivalency, where it became a relative stalemate. For that and back to the beginning, we don't know where this money went. Zelensky says he didn't receive a lot of it. There's actually a lot of truth to that. I've actually had to go through and done reviews. So there's actually truth that there's a lot of money that didn't arrive. But he's absolutely accountable for the money that did arrive. And we don't know what happened. So, yes, was this a money laundering operation? Oh, yeah, in a lot of ways. Hey, this was Haiti on steroids. They learned the model in Haiti. And that's when they started getting interested in Ukraine. It was before the first Russian invasion. The Victoria Nulands, they realized, hey, this thing called Ukraine, which was a mess. It was a mess. Lots of international skullduggery going on in Ukraine. And they go, hey, this could be Haiti on steroids. So, bottom line, and I think Zelensky really... I tried to be extremely impartial and nonpartisan on either side. I don't think Zelensky could have done a better job of losing everybody's goodwill, anybody who had goodwill toward him, with his behavior in the White House, with his behavior immediately after the White House debacle. And it's like, any shred of support he had for me went out the window after I saw his behavior. I said, look, that is the behavior of somebody who does not have America's best interest. First thing he did was go to Europe First thing he did was go to Europe and, essentially badmouthed us. And I said, fine, that's it. Zero.
Yeah.
Zero.
Let me read to you what Colonel Daniel Davis recently said. He said, "It is so ironic that European leaders across the continent constantly hold Zelensky up as a hero, oblivious to the fact that his policies have led to catastrophic losses for his country. Even worse, they are blind to the suffering and languishing of the people of Ukraine, many of whom recognize Zelensky is nearly the opposite of a hero." So, the elites that want to prop him up, take a photo with him, they all look at him as a hero. But then Colonel Davis says, you get on the ground and you talk to the people, they want this war over. Like they've lost family. They've had family that fled into other countries. Your thoughts on Colonel Davis's assessment?
Well, look, I can see from the Ukrainian side, they feel they've lost territory. Got it. There's going to have to be a negotiated settlement, which means maybe they don't get some of their territory back. Okay. And there's some question whether some of that territory was really theirs to begin with. I mean, we talk about the Crimea. Technically, it was Ukrainian, but let's just be real here. There was always a wink and a nod that was in many ways Russian territory. And the Ukrainians benefited, the Russians benefited. So bottom line, look, there has to be an end to this. There has to be an end to this fighting. And, the Europeans were egging him on. Zelensky wanted to go on. The behavior of the Europeans, I have had so many European colleagues just chew my leg off on this matter. You've got to send more money. These are the people who are not even spending, they weren't even achieving the 2% of GDP. They've never achieved the 2% of GDP that has been in that goal that requirement has been in place for decades with NATO. And they want us to spend more of our money when they're not even coming close to the bottom of what was the agreed upon amount that they were supposed to be spending on their own defense. Sorry. I have people, they're terrified. The Russians are going to invade us. Well, sounds like you guys need to spend more time on your own militaries. Sorry. This is, sorry. It's another lesson here. We never fight for anybody who's not willing to fight for themselves. And the Europeans, I'm sorry. You never fight for anybody who's not demonstrating a resolve to fight for themselves.
Yeah. What about what's your best guess? Is Trump going to be able to get this ceasefire agreement done between Russia and Ukraine? My opinion is, and I'm not pro-Russian here, I'm just saying it does seem like Russia is more willing to discuss this than Ukraine. I don't know if there's ego involved or the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, they don't want to give up territory, so they'd rather keep fighting. Your thoughts on Trump being able to get this thing over?
Yeah, this is peacemaking, which is always difficult. And you have to get both sides to be willing to cease. I think you have to go through, I think there's a basic agreement to essentially stop the naval war. That's an important one. And that's an important one on all sides. The Ukrainians, with a motley crew of drones, have effectively shut down the Russian Black Sea Fleet. They've eviscerated the Russian Black Sea Fleet. But making start with that. There needs to be a willingness on both sides to stop the cross-border shooting, and that's still going on both sides. And Russia shouldn't be firing from their territory into Ukraine, and Ukraine shouldn't be firing from their territory into Russia. That's one of the next steps. So it's going to take a while for things to settle down. And you also, both sides have to deal with tactical commanders that it's in their DNA to just want to get that next hilltop, that next intersection. that next building, so I can, once things are locked in, I can have better oversight and early warning on my tactical front. That's just the way military commanders operate and behave. So it takes a while for this to settle down. I think it's starting to get there. I think the fighting has definitely settled down. We've already essentially shut down the naval aspect to it. Okay. Next is stop the cross border, and both sides are guilty of this. Stop the cross border. Nothing shoots a gun. Because of one of the biggest bargaining chips that Zelensky had, he foolishly lost because of his behavior in the White House. He had a relatively large footprint inside of Russia, and he was a jerk. So President Trump said, "Okay, fine. We're cutting off supplies. We're cutting off intelligence." And that essentially, they essentially lost most of their terrain because of that. Bad decision by Zelensky. He gave away he was stupid. He gave away his best bargaining chip. So, he learned a hard lesson.
Yeah, just today, President Trump said, he's fought a good fight, but he's not done a great job for his people. Meaning, like, he should have been pushing to end this war before hundreds of thousands of people were killed. Okay, final question for you. I know you're not a politician, but it looks like this $1 trillion military spending bill is happening. Do you believe do you believe the new money that goes into that, is that Trump's attempt to rebuild the military? I know we're behind on weapons, we're behind on equipment, we're behind on ammunition. Is this now part of making America great again by making America prepared again?
Yeah, I think, and you kind of mentioned it up toward the front part of there's some who said, okay, Trump says no. I think Trump has been incredibly clear on all of his points, and they're not mutually exclusive. He says no forever wars. But he also says we're going to have the biggest, strongest military ever, but we're not going to get involved in forever wars. And some people can't in their brains understand this concept, and they kind of, but you said no forever wars, but you're going to build up the military. Well, the more you have a strong military that demonstrates deterrence, the less likely you're going to have a forever war, okay? So these are not mutually exclusive points. He doesn't want a forever war, but he's hitting the Houthis. Houthis are bad people. They're troublemakers. They are bad, okay? So I hope, and I think what we're doing, though, as we drive wokeism and DEI, which is a huge, huge drag coefficient to delivery, that as we drive that out of we've lost the art form of the arsenal of democracy and building and generating things. There's one thing that caught my attention, the renewal of the recapitalization of the American nuclear triad, which really, it was Trump 1 that really pushed. It was continued on during the Biden committee era, but one of the legs of that new triad, new bomber B-21, new ballistic missile submarine Columbia, the new ground-based missile was called Sentinel, and I think that was Northrop Grumman. They're down the road a bit on it, but they're way behind schedule, way over budget, and there's talk about canceling that and starting over. And, and I think, and then Northrop Grumman, woke. Maybe we do need to start over again. People, oh my gosh, we spent all this money already, Sentinel, the new missile, we can't possibly stop. Well, hold it. Way behind schedule, way over budget. I'm for a big military, but we got to hold people accountable, and we just can't throw money down a black hole. They can't deliver, we got to get somebody else who can deliver. It's as simple as that. So there's going to be military growth, but we got to be absolutely relentless about getting rid of DEI and wokeness, which is corrosive to actually accomplishing things. And we have to rebuild our industrial base. It is pathetic. And the American industrial base of World War II, we could build an arsenal of democracy because we had a very strong consumer-focused industrial base of manufacturing. Okay, that's unfortunately gone away. So President Trump's policy is to rebuild the industrial, bring back manufacturing to America. It's not a soundbite bite. This is a deep intellectual, political, and economic issue and concept. So once we bring, it's going to take some time, but as we bring back manufacturing to America, it will help in the recapitalization of our defense industrial base. So all of these are absolutely interconnected. But yeah, big budget. But for that big budget, we have to have performance. We have to have successful delivery. And if somebody can't deliver, sorry, we're not going to continue to throw money down a black hole.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Northrop Grumman is within a very short drive of my house. So I know the company very well. Really quickly, I said that was the last question, but you said something that sparked an idea. So Obama, much of Obama's presidency was that these industrial-based hands-on jobs were gone. They weren't coming back. Last week, the former head of the U.S. Treasury, Janet Yellen, said Trump is living in a pipe dream. Those jobs are never coming back, but they are. The money is pouring back in. And so I think we do have to rebuild that. We've got to train the people. Maybe it's time to quit sending kids off to, study gender at college and get them into something that could make a good wage and actually, produce something for the economy, for the country, for the safety of the country. When I saw Janet Yellen say, Trump's living a pipe dream, it's never happening, it just echoed back to Obama saying those jobs are gone. They're never coming back, right? I believe Trump believes he can bring them back.
It's a derivation of the British managed decline philosophy of the empire after the Second World War. We're just going to sit back and live on our land holdings, and we're going to let the poor, pathetic people around the world actually do things. And it's the American version, the American elite. We're not, we're going to all work at nonprofits, making slides about what we do with more government money that was laundered to us and things like that. And we're going to let those poor, pathetic people of color in other countries make everything. No, that's a horrible attitude. It's racist. There's everything's wrong about that. A country is not a country if they don't secure their borders and if they can't make things. And if they can't make things that make things, that is foundational to a country. Otherwise, you become, and we may have some viewers from Greece, but you become Greece, a once mighty civilization that's now a nation of coffee shops, okay, and restaurants. Okay, that's not no, you need to make things. And that means you have to be competitive. You have to be innovative. Look, the Japanese kicked our rear end by the early 70s when it came to manufacturing because we had become lazy. We'd become complacent. And the Japanese cars came in and stopped us. But we learned a good lesson. And the Japanese actually, over time, because there's a certain economic point which makes sense, and they moved a lot of their companies to the U.S. And so, that was a great partnership. We really had become complacent. And the Japanese, it was competitive, but it was also a close partnership. Okay, that's great. That's great. We both learned a thing or two. But that's, in the end, you got to make things. You have to substantively make things and make the things that make things. That means the tooling equipment to make the machines. Okay. So, Janet Yellen, I just resent that imperious globalist elite mentality. We're too good to make things. Well, eventually you're going to become a nation of nothing if nobody makes any things. Not everybody can work in a government job. Not everybody can work at a nonprofit making slides funded by laundered taxpayer money. Okay. You got to actually make something. You got to actually
Yeah.
do something of value. Everybody with purple hair, get out there and do something constructive. Okay. You're not going to get paid just because you have purple hair.
Yeah. Oh, man. Colonel Mills, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know how valuable your time is. If people want to follow you online, I want to point them to your book so that they can read that. But where can they follow you online?
Oh, thank you, Stephen. Colonel Ret John, Colonel R.E.T. John on Substack, and Colonel R.E.T. John 2 on X. And the books are War Against the Deep State and the Nation Will Follow, signed copies on Lindell My Store, or just get the unsigned copies straight from Amazon.
Okay. I will put those direct links down below. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. Always an honor to be on your show. Thank you.